Imagine a pirate ship prowling the Atlantic during the height of the most industrial, mechanized war the world had ever seen. It captures 14 enemy vessels, destroys millions of dollars in cargo, and takes hundreds of prisoners. Yet when the smoke clears and the war ends, not a single life has been lost to its cannons or its crew. This is the impossible true story of Count Felix von Luckner, the Sea Devil, the last true privateer who proved that even in the heart of total war, humanity could still prevail.
To understand the legend of the Sea Devil, we must first look at the boy who would become the myth. Born into Prussian nobility in 1881, Felix von Luckner seemed destined for a life of rigid military discipline. His father was a cavalry officer who expected his son to follow in the footsteps of his ancestors, patrolling the borders of the German Empire on horseback. But Felix had a different horizon in mind. He didn't want the dust of the parade grounds. He wanted the salt of the sea.
At the age of 13, Felix did something unthinkable for a young count. He ran away. He didn't leave with a chest of gold or a letter of recommendation. He left with nothing but the clothes on his back, assuming the pseudonym Felix Ludique to hide his noble roots. For 7 years, the young count lived the life of a common deckhand, a sea dog in the truest sense. He worked on Russian tramp steamers, American fishing boats, and even spent time as a professional wrestler and a lighthouse keeper. He was a man who had seen the world from the bottom up, developing a physical strength that was said to be superhuman. He could bend coins with his fingers and tear telephone directories in half with his bare hands.
When he finally returned to Germany, he was no longer a runaway boy, but a seasoned mariner. He joined the Imperial German Navy, and because of his immense practical experience, he rose through the ranks with staggering speed. By the time World War I broke out in 1914, Luckner was a lieutenant commander. But as the war turned into a bloody stalemate of trenches and dreadnoughts, Luckner grew restless. He saw the modern Navy as a collection of floating iron boxes, devoid of the romance and skill of the Age of Sail. He proposed a plan so audacious the German High Command thought he was mad. He wanted to take a sailing ship, disguise it as a neutral merchant vessel, and slip through the British blockade to wage guerrilla warfare on the high seas.
The ship they gave him was the Pass of Balmalha, a captured American three-masted windjammer. Luckner renamed her the Sea Eagle, the Sea Eagle. To the casual observer, she was a harmless timber ship from Norway. Luckner went to extreme lengths to maintain this illusion. He handpicked a crew that could speak Norwegian, filled the cabins with Norwegian books and photographs, and even hid a secret engine behind a false bulkhead. If the British stopped them, they would see a group of simple sailors carrying wood. They wouldn't see the 2 hidden 105mm cannons or the high-powered wireless equipment tucked away in the hold.
On a freezing day in December 1916, the Sea Adler set sail. Luckner's first test came almost immediately. A British cruiser, the HMS Avenger, intercepted them in the North Sea. The British boarding party spent nearly an hour on the ship, searching for contraband. Luckner, dressed in a wig and a woman's dress, pretended to be the captain's wife, suffering from a toothache to explain his muffled voice. The ruse worked perfectly. The British sailors, ever the gentlemen, apologized for the intrusion and let them pass. The Sea Devil had escaped his first trap without firing a single shot.
Once they reached the open Atlantic, the Sea Adler shed its disguise. The Norwegian flag was lowered, and the Imperial German ensign was raised. The hunt had begun. But Luckner's brand of warfare was unlike anything the world had seen. He was a student of the old school, a man who believed in the laws of chivalry. When he encountered an enemy merchant ship, he didn't just open fire. He would approach under a neutral flag, then suddenly reveal his cannons and signal the other ship to stop.
His methods were theatrical and effective. He would use a megaphone to shout commands in perfect English, often inviting the enemy captain over to the Sea Adler for a consultation. Once the enemy crew realized they were captured, Luckner would ensure every single sailor was safely evacuated before he sank their ship. He didn't just save their lives, he treated them as honored guests.
He established what he called the Golden Eagle Club on board the Sea Adler, where captured officers were given fine wine, tobacco, and high-quality meals. He refused to put his prisoners in irons, allowing them to roam the deck and even organize concerts.
The Sea Adler became a phantom of the Atlantic. One by one, British, French, and Italian ships vanished. The Allies were baffled. They were looking for high-speed cruisers and submarines, not a 19th century sailing ship that seemed to appear out of the fog and vanish just as quickly. Over several months, Luckner captured 11 ships in the Atlantic. His reputation grew among his prisoners, many of whom came to admire the pirate count, who treated them with more respect than their own commanders. However, the Atlantic eventually became too crowded with hunters. Luckner decided to take the Sea Adler around Cape Horn and into the Pacific. The journey was treacherous, battling the fiercest storms on the planet, but the Sea Adler survived. In the Pacific, they captured 3 more ships, bringing their total to 14. But months at sea without a port of call were taking their toll. Scurvy began to break out among the crew and the prisoners. Luckner knew he needed to find land to give his men fresh fruit and water.
They found refuge at Mopalia, a small, uninhabited coral atoll in the Society Islands. It was a paradise, or so it seemed. They anchored the Sea Adler outside the reef and ferried the crew and prisoners ashore. For a few weeks, the war felt a world away. But the sea is a fickle mistress. On August 2nd, 1917, a freak disaster struck. Some accounts say it was a massive tidal wave caused by a distant earthquake. Others suggest the ship simply drifted onto the reef during a change in the tide. Whatever the cause, the Sea Adler was smashed against the coral. The great eagle of the sea was dead.
Stranded on a desert island with dozens of prisoners and a wrecked ship, most men would have surrendered. Not Luckner. He took 5 of his best men and rigged an 18-foot lifeboat with a sail. They named it the Kronprinzessin Ceciliae. His plan was insane. He would sail nearly 2,300 miles across the open Pacific to the Fiji Islands, capture another sailing ship, and return to Mopalia to rescue the rest of his crew. For weeks, they battled the elements in their tiny boat. They endured blistering sun, salt sores, and thirst. When they finally reached the Fiji Islands, they were exhausted but triumphant. Luckner, ever the actor, tried to pass himself off as a shipwrecked Dutch-American sailor, but the local authorities grew suspicious. In a final, dramatic confrontation, a group of armed Fijian police confronted Luckner. Though he had a hidden machine gun and could have likely mowed them down, Luckner looked at the men before him. He realized that to escape, he would have to kill people who were simply doing their duty. He chose to surrender his weapon instead. He reportedly said, "I will not have it said that I, a German officer, killed an unarmed man."
Luckner was taken to a prisoner of war camp in New Zealand. Even in captivity, his spirit couldn't be broken. He staged a daring escape from Motu'ihai Island, stealing the camp commander's motorboat and then capturing a 90-ton schooner, the Moa, using nothing but a wooden fake machine gun he had carved in his cell. He managed to evade the New Zealand Navy for several days before he was finally recaptured. He spent the remainder of the war in prison, but he left as a hero, even in the eyes of his captors.
When the war ended and Luckner returned to Germany, he found a country shattered by defeat and political turmoil. He wrote his memoirs, The Sea Devil, which became an international bestseller. He traveled the world, particularly the United States, where he was treated like a celebrity. He was made an honorary citizen of many American cities, including San Francisco. People were captivated by the story of the pirate who had fought a clean war. He spoke of a brotherhood of the sea, a bond between sailors that transcended national borders and political ideologies.
However, the darkest chapter of Luckner's life was yet to come. In the 1930s, the Nazi Party rose to power in Germany. They tried to use Luckner's fame for their own propaganda, portraying him as the ultimate Aryan warrior. But Luckner was a man of the old world, a man of honor who found the Nazi ideology abhorrent. He refused to join the party. He refused to renounce his honorary citizenships in the United States. he was eventually silenced by the regime, his bank accounts frozen, and his public appearances banned.
In the final days of World War II, the Sea Devil performed one last act of heroism. As American forces approached his home city of Halle, the Nazi leadership ordered the city to be defended to the last man, which would have resulted in its total destruction. Luckner, now an old man, ignored the orders. He rode out to the American lines under a white flag and negotiated the peaceful surrender of the city. He saved thousands of lives, both German and American, proving once again that he valued human life above military glory.
Count Felix von Luckner passed away in 1966 at the age of 84. He was buried in Hamburg, the great port city he loved. His legacy isn't written in the number of ships he sank or the territory he conquered. It is written in the lives he spared. In an era defined by the horror of the trenches and the birth of industrial slaughter, the Sea Devil stood as a reminder that honor is a choice. He was a man who navigated the gray areas of war with a compass set firmly on his own moral north. He was a pirate, a count, a wrestler, and a fugitive. But above all, he was a man who proved that you can win a war without losing your soul. Subscribe for more incredible stories from history.